and
I was
stuff, but
just
most
walking
people...
and picking up beer cans because I could recycle them and make a few dollars. And you're like, you look like someone interesting. And I'm like, I could. So this is all made up. You know, it's just I'm just.
Yeah,
like,
maybe
like,
that's how I should find my new people.
Just please say that you live in a clay house because I need someone to fit that role for me. It's like, okay, well I could pass it off.
Hello outsiders, and welcome to part 3 of this 5-part interview with my friend Michael. He lives outside all the time in a clay hut. If you missed part 1 and 2 of this interview, then the link is below to get to those parts, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Please like and subscribe to this channel. It's okay, baby.
What do you spend most of your time doing?
What do I spend most of my time? So it varies. So like my first year out on the land, like it was working really hard. We were fixing the driveway, so it'd be there's a driveway down there full of rocks, and it's supposed to be full of rocks. But anyway, the water washes it out, and so we have to get another truckload of rocks and wheelbarrow it down I was just running a wheelbarrow down the driveway, or pickaxing, or she was doing and still is somewhat a lot of clay building or building with cob. So she had a pit, just a rock pit, and it had already been dug from people that had been there before me, and so you just take a pickaxe and you just keep digging the clay out of it, and then you can take the clay over, and then you have to you have to put it in water, and then you just pull it out, and you get the rocks and the stuff out of it, and then that's clean clay, and then from there you can make cob. So I spent a lot of time harvesting the clay, and then it got to a point where I hit the rock, and so I had to break through the rock. It was pretty soft, but nonetheless, just break through the rock with the pickaxe. Just do that for hours actually, and then harvest the clay, carry the buckets over, and then you sort the clay, and then also making the cob. I got really good at it. It used to take me an hour to make a batch, and then I got it down to 30 minutes.
Hey, half time. Yeah, that's great.
We'd get up, we'd spend an hour in the garden. We had a pretty intensive garden back then, and
you don't have do you still have a garden out there? Do you grow food?
Yes, we're very busy doing other things, and so the garden has and she's maybe not that happy about it, but
no.
but we're drawn in different places. Like there's still squash and things like that, and
nice.
Also the neighbor's dog died last year, and so the deer have been getting in and ate our okra and stuff like that. And
deer problems.
Deer
gotta get a fence.
Oh yeah, it's just a matter of repurposing things, and buying fence will be expensive, and when you're budgeting for this kind of lifestyle.
Make a fence.
And actually, she did, not bamboo, river cane, and anyway, make a fence or whatever. But so we'd spend an hour squashing eggs in the garden, and then in the evening it'd be an hour watering. I mean, doing it literally organic.
Are there any animals?
We
chickens,
and then a few cats, and so we have eggs, and then we're sifting sand to get basically really fine sand to use in cement and things like that to build structures. So that was a lot of my first year, just a lot of just working all day, harvesting materials, and so that I was the first line of defense so that they can go build with them. And then the second year, and it's something I'm really passionate, I planted a bunch of trees out there on the land. My idea is that like one day we'll all have, it takes 6 to 10 years, or sometimes 20 if you're a pecan, to get a fruit or a nut out of things.
Yeah.
But then the idea is down the road we'll all have this food infrastructure that like we can.
So they're like fruit trees or.
And theoretically they just grow on their own, and you can just harvest them like a service berry. It'll fruit for 30 years. So like once you get it to where it's mature, and you keep the deer from eating it and help it through the droughts and things like that, then you have a tree that will give you baskets full of fruit, every year. That's really healthy, and so I spent a lot of time putting in that infrastructure, but then I found out you kind of learn by doing, or you kind of learn what you should have done the first time, but it's just you just go and then you figure it out. And so I realized that the deer kept eating the tops of the trees, and they had eaten a bunch of trees she had planted before I was out there. And so I was just like, oh, okay, we got to protect the trees. So then like the second year, there was like 120 trees on the property or something like that, and not all of them survived. But anyway, I just went around caging everything and cutting the chicken wire and doing all that project. I spent like $500 on materials, and then found out at the end of all that like, oh, I shouldn't use chicken wire because it'll just rust in a couple of years, and didn't really. But that's how you learn. And now
exactly.
instead now I found welded wire for much cheaper, that's stronger, that'll last forever. And so I spent second year doing a lot of tree infrastructure and things like that. And
would you say that's like your biggest passion, is like the trees and like the native plants? And
yes, yeah, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
I could come up with some long answer, but
you were explaining at lunch that some people have Wi-Fi connection.
I just met you. No, I'm
No.
kidding. I was
stuff,
just walking and picking up beer cans because I could recycle them and make a few dollars. And you're like, you look like someone interesting. And I'm like, I could. So this is all made up. You know, it's just. I'm just.
Yeah,
like,
maybe
like,
that's how I should find my new people.
Just please say that you live in a clay house, because I need someone to fit that role for me. It's like, okay, well, I could pass it off. She gave me this shirt. I don't know who the heck this is.
He's actually just this homeless guy.
But anyway, what was the? We can keep going if you want. You know, the bloopers.
So there's not power. Some people have solar panels.
Yeah.
But other people don't. And so
we don't have electricity.
Mm-hmm.
We're not on the grid at all. Right. Or don't have solar panels. We have solar panel flashlights.
Yeah.
And we charge our phones in our car, and we can drive 12 miles into town to use a computer and stuff like that. So we're not totally cut off. But
yeah. But like, I feel like you've got to be happier out there.
Yeah, well, and I can't necessarily like, oh, this is the key to happiness, do these XYZ things, but for one of the benefits is when you're just working sort of in the system, or whatever you want to call it, someone skimming off the top of you, and then they give you your cut of the share, and then you go and pay your rent. And so like my first week out on the land, the land was still kind of not frozen, but it was still hard to work with, and we put in a culvert. Mm-hmm. And just to let water go through the driveway, and it took 3 days, and I wasn't in shape. I was this, more overweight person in city kid, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so actually she was like the hardcore pickaxer, and I was just like doing the little shit, because it was like going from doing nothing to like working for hours and hours. It was like, but anyway, so it took 3 days to put this thing in, but it's still there 2.5 years later working. And so it's nice to recoup your efforts. It's like, oh, that was so much work, but oh, there it is, or I learned how to do it better. But nonetheless, it's like you're not just putting your time in and then you go. It's like there's a direct relationship between your work and your accomplishments. Right. Or there was one night where I started a tree nursery, more or less, or just trees that I'm taking care of. And I put this deer fence around, and it was working for several months. And the deer were looking at it because they like to eat the tops off of new growth, and they'll really stunt trees that way. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I wanted to go to bed, and I happened to walk up the long way to go to the chickens, and I noticed that a deer finally jumped over the fence and like smashed it down. And so I had to run and get some screws and tie and try and fix it. And it's like, so part of it is just necessity. There's a lot to do, but it does feel rewarding. And there's a lot more freedom to. It's kind of like an open canvas. Like there's no building codes there, so you can really sort of create. And part of it is necessity, but there's still a reward in doing it.